911, where's your emergency? Hello? 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 Son, I have nothing but gunshots. Hello?
In July 2010, the city of Memphis, Tennessee entered the sweltering days of summer, with temperatures frequently exceeding 90 degrees Fahrenheit. It was also the city most closely associated with Lorenzen Wright, the former 6'11" center who played 13 seasons in the NBA and was widely regarded as a hometown hero in Memphis. After retiring, Wright moved to Atlanta, Georgia, but he frequently returned to Tennessee to visit his family and his 6 children. Meanwhile, his ex-wife, Shara Wright, continued living in Collierville, a town in Shelby County, Tennessee. Their marriage had ended after many years together, but they remained connected through their children and ongoing financial matters. Few could have imagined that just days later, Lorenzen Wright's name would appear across news broadcasts throughout the United States in a case that would shock the public for years. According to investigative records and the arguments presented during the trial, on the evening of July 18, 2010, Lorenzen Wright returned to the Memphis area to attend his son's birthday celebration. After spending time with his family, he went to meet his ex-wife, Shara Wright. It appeared to be an ordinary meeting between two people who shared 6 children together. However, prosecutors later argued that throughout that period, Shara deliberately led Lorenzen into a plan that had been prepared in advance. After leaving the residential neighborhood, the vehicle continued toward Calais Cutoff, a sparsely populated area in southeast Memphis. The roads became increasingly deserted, and the streetlights gradually disappeared, giving way to the darkness that blanketed the wooded outskirts of the city. According to investigators' findings, Billy Ray Turner was already waiting there before Lorenzen arrived. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoy the channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment to support us. As soon as Lorenzen arrived, the ambush began. According to the case file, Turner suddenly opened fire on the victim. With no time to react, Lorenzen turned and ran into the woods, hoping to find a way out. While running, he managed to pull out his phone and place an emergency call to 911.
Georgetown 911, where's your emergency? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Just a few brief seconds after the dispatcher answered, the operator heard a loud cry, followed by multiple gunshots echoing through the night, before the call was suddenly disconnected. If you found this content informative and would like to follow more cases analyzed objectively based on case records and evidence, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment sharing your perspective. Your support motivates us to continue bringing you higher quality videos in the future. See you in the next video. According to the evidence presented at trial, Lorenzen was struck by multiple gunshots and collapsed in the wooded area. Prosecutors argued that the entire incident was not a spontaneous act, but the result of a premeditated plan, alleging that Shara Wright organized the scheme and lured Lorenzen to the ambush site, while Billy Ray Turner was the person who carried out the shooting. However, what happened after that night shocked the entire city of Memphis even more, because it would take several more days before the truth gradually came to light. In the early morning hours of July 19, 2010, the 911 Emergency Communications Center received a brief call from Lorenzen Wright's phone. The dispatcher only had time to hear a scream, followed by multiple gunshots before the line was suddenly disconnected. Because the call had been transferred between 911 dispatch centers and the exact location of the signal could not be determined, law enforcement was unable to launch a search that same night. 3 days later, on July 22nd, Lorenzen's mother, Deborah Marion, officially reported to the Memphis Police Department, MPD, that her son had been missing and out of contact for several days under unusual circumstances. On July 28th, after reviewing the location data from the 911 call, investigators entered the Calais Cutoff area and discovered Lorenzen Wright's body in a remote wooded area, marking the beginning of one of the most shocking criminal investigations in Memphis history. On the morning of July 28, 2010, after reanalyzing the data from the 911 call and narrowing down the location of the phone's final signal, investigators from the Memphis Police Department, MPD, along with assisting personnel, entered the heavily wooded Calais Cutoff area in southeast Memphis. The dense vegetation, limited public access, and oppressive summer heat made the search especially challenging. Upon discovering Lorenzen Wright's body, investigators immediately secured the entire area to preserve the crime scene. Police tape was placed around the area believed to contain evidence, while crime scene investigators began marking each significant location before documenting the scene with photographs and diagrams. Shell casings scattered across the ground, together with the position of the body and the surrounding evidence, quickly indicated that this was not a death caused by an accident or natural causes. Investigators also directed the crime scene unit to collect every piece of evidence that could be relevant, from shell casings and ground impressions to any data that might assist in reconstructing the crime scene. Within the first few hours, the investigation was officially reclassified as a homicide investigation, and all necessary resources were mobilized to identify the person responsible for Lorenzen Wright's death. However, what forensic experts determined afterward raised even more questions than answers. After the crime scene was secured, crime scene specialists from the Memphis Police Department, MPD, working in coordination with the Shelby County Medical Examiner's Office, conducted a detailed forensic examination. The crime scene documentation showed that multiple shell casings were recovered from the area surrounding the body, including 9mm and .380 caliber shell casings, indicating that multiple shots had been fired within the same location. Investigators also prepared a diagram documenting the location of each piece of evidence, photographed the scene, and collected trace evidence for forensic analysis. Because the body was not discovered until approximately 9 days later, after being exposed to summer weather with temperatures frequently exceeding 90 degrees Fahrenheit, decomposition had progressed significantly. Nevertheless, forensic experts were still able to identify multiple gunshot wounds to the head and upper body. The autopsy concluded that the cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds, and the manner of death was officially classified as homicide. In addition to the forensic findings, the physical evidence collected at the scene, particularly the shell casings and the data from the earlier 911 call, was sealed and submitted to the crime laboratory for forensic examination. These were critical pieces of physical evidence that formed the foundation for reconstructing the events of the case and comparing them with evidence gathered in the years that followed. However, despite having several key pieces of evidence in hand, investigators were still unable to quickly determine who was responsible for Lorenzen Wright's death. Immediately after the Shelby County Medical Examiner's Office determined that Lorenzen Wright's death was a homicide, the Memphis Police Department, MPD, established a dedicated investigative task force to reconstruct the final hours of his movements. The investigators' first objective was to determine whom Lorenzen had met, where he had traveled, and with whom he had communicated before he disappeared. Investigators began collecting phone records, cellular tower data, and statements from family members, friends, and individuals who had been in contact with Lorenzen during his final days. The data showed that his last communications were all directed toward the Memphis area, and also confirmed that the emergency call to 911 had been placed just before his phone signal disappeared. The recording of that call quickly became one of the central pieces of evidence in the case and was analyzed repeatedly to determine the number of gunshots, the direction of the sounds, and other details that could assist in reconstructing the crime scene. At the same time, investigators reviewed individuals who had close relationships with Lorenzen, including family members, business associates, and people with financial ties to him. Following standard investigative procedures in homicide cases in the United States, every possible theory was considered, ranging from personal conflict and financial disputes to the possibility that the incident was connected to a robbery or a random act of violence. However, as each stage of the investigation progressed, many of the initial theories were gradually ruled out because they were inconsistent with the evidence that had been collected. In the years that followed, the case became a cold case because there was insufficient evidence to identify and prosecute any suspect. Even so, the case was never closed. Investigators continued to preserve all physical evidence, periodically reviewed the case file, and applied new forensic techniques whenever conditions allowed. Whenever new information emerged or tips were received from the public, the investigative team compared them against the existing body of evidence to verify their credibility. A turning point began to emerge when the MPD Cold Case Unit reopened the case years later. In addition to reviewing all previous witness statements, investigators continued analyzing the physical evidence, tracing the origins of firearms that might have been connected to the case, and examining information that had previously been impossible to verify. It was this persistent investigative effort that gradually narrowed the scope of suspicion and opened an entirely new direction for the case. At this point, the pieces that had seemed disconnected for so many years began to come together, bringing the investigation to its most significant turning point since Lorenzen Wright's body had been discovered. Many years after Lorenzen Wright's death, the first arrests in the case were carried out in December 2017. On the morning of December 5, investigators from the Memphis Police Department, MPD, together with assisting personnel, approached Billy Ray Turner in the Memphis area. According to information released by law enforcement, Turner was taken into custody without confrontation or the use of force. After being informed of the arrest warrant, he was transported to a Shelby County detention facility for processing in accordance with standard procedures. 10 days later, on December 15, the effort to apprehend the remaining suspect was carried out in California. Because Shara Wright had left Tennessee, the execution of the arrest warrant was assigned to the U.S. Marshals Service in coordination with local law enforcement. Shara was located in Riverside, California, where deputies arrested her pursuant to a warrant issued by a Tennessee court. According to law enforcement officials, the arrest was carried out without incident, and there were no reports that Shara resisted or attempted to flee when officers approached her. After the initial procedures were completed, Shara Wright was extradited back to Tennessee to face criminal charges related to the death of Lorenzen Wright. Meanwhile, Billy Ray Turner remained in local custody, awaiting the next stages of the legal proceedings. At this stage, the focus of the case was no longer identifying suspects, but had shifted to the process of conducting interviews, gathering statements, and strengthening the case before it went to trial. After their arrests, Billy Ray Turner and Shara Wright were questioned separately in accordance with the procedures of the Memphis Police Department, MPD. Investigators did not publicly disclose the details of the interviews, but court records indicate that neither of them produced a breakthrough during the initial stages of questioning. Billy Ray Turner denied the allegations against him and continued to maintain that he had no role in Lorenzen Wright's death. Meanwhile, Shara Wright also did not make a confession immediately after her arrest. As a result, investigators continued comparing each of their statements with the physical evidence, phone records, forensic findings, and the documents that had been collected throughout the many years of the investigation. A turning point did not come until the later stages of the legal proceedings. In July 2019, Shara Wright agreed to sign a plea agreement with the Shelby County District Attorney's Office. Under this agreement, she pleaded guilty to the charges of facilitation of first-degree murder and attempted criminal homicide, while also agreeing to provide testimony to assist in the prosecution. This marked the first time that one of the primary defendants formally accepted criminal responsibility in the case. Unlike Shara Wright, Billy Ray Turner maintained his not guilty plea and chose to have his case decided by a jury trial. From that point forward, the focus of the case shifted from the investigation to the courtroom confrontation between the prosecution and the defense, where all of the evidence would be examined under the law. When the investigation was reopened, prosecutors from the Shelby County District Attorney's Office began strengthening the case by combining all of the evidence collected over the years into a complete sequence of events. Rather than relying on a single piece of evidence, the case was built on the consistency between the physical evidence, technical data, and witness testimony. One of the most important pieces of evidence was the recording of the 911 call made from Lorenzen Wright's phone shortly before his death. Telecommunications data helped establish the area where the call originated and was consistent with the location where his body was later discovered. The crime scene findings, forensic examination results, and the physical evidence recovered from the callus cutoff area were also included in the case file to reconstruct the events of the crime. In addition to the physical evidence, prosecutors gathered testimony from multiple witnesses, along with documents related to Lorenzen Wright's relationships with individuals connected to him in the period before his disappearance. After Shara Wright accepted the plea agreement, her guilty plea and the information she provided became part of the prosecution's body of evidence. However, the prosecution did not rely solely on her statements, but also required them to be corroborated by independent evidence to ensure objectivity and satisfy the standard of proof required in court. After reviewing the entire case file, the Shelby County Grand Jury concluded that there was sufficient legal basis to formally indict the defendants. From that point on, the case officially entered the trial phase, where the value of each piece of evidence would be examined publicly before a jury. When the case was brought before the court, the Shelby County District Attorney's Office argued that the body of evidence collected over many years was sufficient to prove the defendant's criminal conduct. Prosecutors presented the forensic findings, the 911 call data, the investigative records, and the testimony admitted under the rules of criminal procedure to reconstruct the entire sequence of events for the jury. Meanwhile, Billy Ray Turner's defense attorney argued that the prosecution's case still contained significant gaps and questioned the reliability of certain testimony, as well as the interpretation of some of the evidence. Both sides repeatedly argued over the legal weight of each piece of evidence, causing the trial to continue for several days before the jury began deliberations. As for Shara Wright, her case was not presented to a jury. In July 2019, she accepted a plea agreement and pleaded guilty to the charges of facilitation of first-degree murder and attempted criminal homicide. Under the terms of the agreement, Shara Wright was sentenced to 30 years in prison and waived her right to appeal the sentence. As for Billy Ray Turner, the trial did not result in a final verdict. After several days of deliberation, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision. Under those circumstances, the judge declared a mistrial, meaning that Turner was neither convicted nor acquitted. As a result, the case against him remained unresolved, bringing the trial to a conclusion different from what many people had expected. Lorenzen Wright's death shocked the city of Memphis, where he was known not only as a former NBA star, but also as someone who regularly participated in community activities. After many years of waiting, Shara Wright's guilty plea was widely regarded as a significant step forward, as the case had finally established at least part of the responsibility under the law. However, the outcome of Billy Ray Turner's trial generated mixed reactions. When the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict and the trial ended in a mistrial, many people felt that Lorenzen's family still had not received complete answers. Meanwhile, those who support the principle of a fair trial emphasize that a criminal conviction can only be returned when the charge has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Lorenzen Wright's family repeatedly expressed their hope that the case would be fully resolved and that justice would be served. To this day, the case continues to be remembered as one of the most high-profile criminal cases in Memphis history, while also serving as a reminder of the persistence of investigators in pursuing cases that span many years. Do you believe the outcome of the Lorenzen Wright case truly delivered justice? Or do you think there are still unanswered questions? Does Shara Wright's guilty plea and 30-year prison sentence, while Billy Ray Turner's trial ended in a mistrial because the jury could not reach a unanimous verdict, leave you questioning the outcome of this case? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Every opinion can offer a different perspective on justice as long as it is based on respect for the facts and the rulings of the law. The Lorenzen Wright case leaves behind much more to reflect on than a criminal verdict. It is not only the story of the death of a former NBA player, but also a reminder of the reality that the greatest dangers do not always come from strangers. They can arise within the very relationships in which we once placed our deepest trust. For many years, the investigation was nearly at a standstill. Had it not been for the persistence of investigators in preserving the physical evidence, reviewing the case files, and continuing to pursue old leads, the case might very well have remained a cold case with no resolution. This demonstrates that within the criminal justice system, Justice sometimes comes very slowly. But an investigation conducted according to proper procedures can still create an opportunity for the truth to emerge, even after many years have passed. At the same time, the case also reflects the limits of the criminal justice process. In criminal cases in the United States, a person may be convicted only when the prosecution proves the charges beyond a reasonable doubt before a jury. Therefore, the fact that a defendant is not convicted does not necessarily mean that every question has been answered. Rather, it reflects the principle of protecting the rights of the accused within a justice system that places great importance on the standard of proof. It is this balance between pursuing justice and safeguarding human rights that forms the foundation of the judicial system. To this day, Lorenzen Wright's name is remembered not only for his basketball career, but also because of a case that changed the lives of many people and left an irreplaceable loss for his family. Some decisions are made in only a brief moment, yet their legal, emotional, and social consequences can last for decades. Perhaps that is the most enduring lesson of this case. When trust is betrayed and violence replaces dialogue, no verdict can ever restore things to the way they once were. Thank you for taking the time to watch the entire video.